Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Sometimes we want to explore the kind of things that make us feel a little more aloft and give us energy. When we come home, we try to revitalize ourselves, but sometimes maybe the way that we're set up just doesn't do that for us. On the program today, we're going to be talking about something simply about aligning your home with nature's energies, which is the subtitle of the book, Earth Alchemy. On the Beyond 50 radio program today, I'd like to welcome our guest, Miss Ann Z. Parker. Ann, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you. Pleasure to join you.
Now, what is Earth Alchemy exactly?
Well, the title of the book was chosen because it sort of indicates a sense of working with the earth energies in a living, active way that transforms your own energy as well.
Oh, I see. Now, and this has a lot about, kind of making the home a better place, a more energizing place?
Right. Well, really a harmonious place where it's almost like when you go home, you're plugging yourself into a nice battery renewal place, so that the home is kind of on a neutral spot that supports just renewal from all the busyness of daily life.
Now, how did you get started in this particular practice?
Well, I suppose many years of things influenced me. I was very interested in looking at indigenous cultures for many years and lived in the central desert of Australia and the remote mountains of Nepal, looking at how people had been in harmony with life and balance around them. And then eventually came home sort of wishing I could find something like that here, and eventually ended up having the good fortune to go to a workshop by my co-author, Dominique Suzani from France, and realized there were people in my Western European heritage who had been working on reviving and reconnecting the lineage from the West.
I was really fascinated by a lot of the images that you have here within the book, and I think sometimes maybe the listeners, as they say, I'm kind of interested in this. For instance, I was taking a look at a vortex. Now, what's going on here? I mean, are these things that are really, around a person's home, perhaps outside, inside?
Yes, they can appear in different ways. It's sort of a natural energy form, and some of the ones that I've personally encountered most are often on the edge of the energy field of a tree. You can meet a vortex, or sometimes, interestingly enough, in a well-placed temple or church, vortexes sort of form at the corners. Those are the ones I've often encountered most often. But it's sort of an exchange of energy between, earth and sky, and an energy form builds up.
Mm-hmm. Now, tell us about what a vortex exactly is and, how it relates to the energies that you're talking about here.
Right. Well, like I mentioned, vortexes form in different ways, at the end of energy fields and different, even almost geometric patterns of buildings can influence a vortex. So it really is an exchange of you could say electromagnetic energy, exchange between, earth and sky. So it rises up from the earth and towards the sky, or in some cases the energy moves the other way. So you could just say there's just, I can't quite explain it very well. Let's see. It's a place where energy is intense in a certain kind of a way, and we can feel it with our bodies. And then there are other areas where they don't form, and we would feel more rested in those areas.
Interesting. Now, do you think especially, let's say here in America today, when you take a look at how, you get into these housing tracts where you tend to have these builders and contractors just throwing things up. I mean, you can actually take a look at these things and you can kind of feel drained by looking at them. That they don't certainly practice earth alchemy in any way, shape, or form, and you can see how people kind of live with situations as they first buy into these because the aesthetic of it, but then after a while they just kind of feel drained, like something's really missing or agitating.
Oh, that's spectacular. I really love your description. That's really, how it feels. And we all kind of know that, but we rarely say it out loud. And I feel like we have a lot that we could be doing, to now go forward with the better building styles. We have really lost a lot of this. So it's a mixture of putting houses on, a lot of water and fire lines that can be very taxing for people without an awareness of how to work with that. And also, following the earth energy work, there's also, sacred geometry work, and we've often been very out of alignment with that, which also leads to the harmonization of the house. And so we've really got places that, over time are taxing and draining in just the way you described. And so what we want to offer here, and that people can do is to actually reharmonize badly harmonized houses, which is kind of a relief because you can still help take down the negative energies and set yourself in a place where you can renew, as you live in your home.
Mm. Now, I was just thinking, as I was describing that particular thing, when you take a look at the work of Frank Lloyd Wright, okay?
Yeah.
Now, would you say this was someone here that actually worked with earth energies? I mean, I would say yes, but what is your opinion?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question because you can get into some of his buildings and just feel really great, and it's a feeling level. The aesthetics is one thing. It looks nice, and there's interesting things to catch the eye, but it's really the feeling, and we all intuitively know how to do this, and sometimes we've just been taught to ignore it, or we've lived in such bad buildings that we kind of don't. But I feel like great, really excellent people like himself were probably dropping into the very deep level of sensibilities as they also did their designs.
Because I keep remembering, especially there's a house in Oregon, which is out at the Oregon Garden, which was actually moved from the original place that it was built, where it was described in a book and actually shown. First it was described, and I thought, oh, this sounds fascinating. Then you see the picture and how the house was aligned with what was going on around it. It was like it belonged where it was. And you got to have a sense that when you're in something like that you belong and that it revitalizes you, which is what the home should do. And you kind of take a look at, well, what if, for instance, you've moved into a place that at first, again, aesthetically, as I described earlier, you get into, but then all of a sudden you feel it draining. What is it? What are some of the things that a person could do with a situation like that? Is it possible to change that?
Right, and I love what you said of, just that moment when you choose your house is really important because you can at that point make a difference. If you're looking at price, you're looking at the design and things like that. But if you also look at feeling, that's really important, and you can also save yourself some trouble if you go there on your first choice. If you feel that feeling like you described of like I feel at home, I feel good. But if you've gotten a place that's not harmonious, you can do some work to fix that. And I'll just describe my little place. I was very drawn by the energy of this great tree that's right next to my little house. And I walked around the house, although at that time we had a real estate sign and I couldn't go in. I walked around to see if I could find any energies around it. And I noticed there was one water line, and later when I had the chance to look inside, there was one that passed through the bedroom. And so I rearranged all the bedroom furniture so I wasn't on that line when I slept. But even so, I wasn't spending much time in the room. It felt like, okay. So then I did a couple of things to harmonize the water line, and later I just harmonized the whole house. And now the house, people walk in and it's very simple, but people go, oh, this is great. You can tell they can feel it with their bodies. It's really fun.
Now, what exactly is a water line?
Well, a water line is, we have underground water that moves. It's saturating the water table, and, slowly it drains in the direction of going towards a river or, going towards a draw or some other way that's effectively moving the water through the landscape. And it forms, it actually, at some point in the beginning, it may just be a diffuse field of water, but then it eventually begins to form like an underground river, moving in the direction. And so it's moving through the subsoil at different levels, and as it moves, it's moving like water does elsewhere in kind of that spiraling fashion. But it creates a bit of friction as it moves, and it's that friction that our body picks up.
Ah, I see. And so you either work against it, which can be draining, or you flow with it, which can be energizing. Right,
and for example, for a home, it's best if there's no water lines underneath the house. Then it's very more relaxing for the body. Although, like I said, in my case, I could harmonize it and sort of retrofit the harmonization. But in other settings, like in great temples and great buildings, people have used those to actually energize people because you don't live in those buildings all the time. You can come in and get inspired energetically, but you wouldn't want to do that in your home because you'd need to recover from the day and just literally plug into the earth and relax.
I know that I remember when the Lord of the Rings series came out, the very first one, and you take a look at the homes, in the Shire of the Hobbits, and, it just, to me, I just love the design. I thought to myself, boy, you talk about a place where you come home at the end of the day and you just love to relax. And I think, what is it with, homes where they have to be squares and blocks and four-cornered walls? Why isn't there a sense of roundness and that kind of a thing? And you took a look at what they had going on as far as the designs, and you can simply see that, kind of what got us into that situation where we were dealing with squares rather than that soothing feeling of the curves.
Yeah, well said. I mean, that's a wonderful image of just that feeling of
well, your home's bringing this through to me.
Yeah. That's right. Kind of the yumminess of the possibilities. We've limited ourselves to rectangles and squares, and actually made a pretty alienating landscape. And when you look at some lovely villages, like pictures of villages in Greece and old towns in Europe and beautiful Himalayan villages, you can see that people live in a beautiful aesthetic. Probably every culture was living in a beautiful aesthetic as just a natural way of living, and it's an invitation to us to find a way back to that.
Now, what are some ways people could achieve this?
Well, there are several things you could do at the beginning. One is to very closely pay attention to the area of your bed, because this is the longest time you spend anywhere. It has a big effect on your adrenal system. So, really carefully, and the book describes that, and I can describe it here if you'd like.
Sure.
This idea of sensing the lines underneath the bed. And so, for water lines, it's your body does already feel them, so it's a matter of knowing or identifying that you feel them. So you want to, we have this way of setting your intention, and it's sort of a three-step process to drop into the way of feeling earth energies. So the first piece is you set a larger intention. So we like to say for the harmony and balance of all life. So you could just say, I'm going to sense this for all life. And then you drop into a specific intention, which, lets your body know you're paying attention to a particular thing. And you're saying, I will sense and feel the natural underground water lines, underneath my bedroom. And you walk, and you can use dowsing rods, but it's actually the body that's feeling it. So you have to do this a few times. It's almost like, getting used to something, like getting used to, a golf swing or something. You have to kind of practice a bit. And then your body begins to feel it. And many people, the water in the body that we hold, actually we're an awful lot of water, but there's a lot of water in the bladder area. So sometimes people feel a tension or a pressure in the bladder area, and some people feel it like a salivation in the mouth. So you begin to notice that there's certain areas where you feel that and certain areas where you don't. And you can try that in your bedroom, but actually the best place to start would be to go outside and go to a dry, like an arroyo or a dry draw or somewhere where water runs in the rainy season, but it's not there now, but there's very likely to be underground water. So you walk in that area and set those two intentions, for all life, and then for I will sense and feel the natural water lines, and then watch how your body feels. And then you begin to pick up the signs, and each body is a little different. So once you've picked up those signs for a water line, then you could go back to your bedroom and walk around and see if your bed is well placed. And that's a great way of starting. You can also just talk to people. I had a business colleague who just would not sleep in her bed, and her husband was very happy. And she ended up sleeping on the living room floor for many months. And so she asked me to come and see her house, and so everybody thought she was kind of nuts. But I said, no, you're actually sleeping on the fire line, and your husband's not. That's why he feels comfortable there, and you feel really jumpy. And so they could move the bed over a few feet and get her off that, and then they could both have a happy time. So it makes a big difference, and that's the place to start in the home is really with the bed. And then office chairs where you spend hours is also a very important thing. Or if you sit and always read for hours in the evening at a certain chair, you want to check those. And if those can be moved off of disharmonious places, that helps a lot. That's a good starting place.
Now, as you were describing, this is something the person, you sort of practice it so you get the feel for it.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Now, is there tools or ways that a person can do this, or is it something that you just sort of develop an instinct and feel for, as you said?
Well, like anything, it's sort of like I'm using sort of golf as an example. Like any sport, the first day you watch people, you can see how it's done, but it takes your body time to get it, And it doesn't hurt to help, work with a golf pro for a day or two and, learn something off of their way of doing things. But with dowsing, you can use dowsing rods or pendulums, and what they do is they just show you what the body's feeling. So they're kind of a feedback loop. And also, if you become professional and do a lot, it's nice to use the rods because it's more restful for the body over, like a large building when you're dowsing a whole building. But the rods can be, the sort of thing that can be bought in stores or bought online. And you hold them in your hand, and you go through that same process that I mentioned with the dowsing rod. So, setting the large intention, setting the specific intention, and then when you walk forward, you hold the rods in a level way so they don't respond to, you wiggling your hands or anything. And then you walk straight along, and they'll move when you come to a water line. And then they'll move again when you step off the water line.
Ah. Now, one of the things that was really enjoyable about the book is when you talk about trees, and there was a place that I used to live, and in the back area of the house there was a cherry tree that actually split into two cherry trees.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first did, I had lived in this place for about 10 years, and then in the front there were 2 walnut trees, one very close to the house. And after 10 years, you see these trees grow from what they were into what they became.
Yeah.
Well, that was a place I rented, and unfortunately how the house was placed under these trees, it was an area that created a tremendous amount of moisture and shade, so there was a lot of moss on the roof, things like that.
Yeah.
Now, which also affected the inside of the area where the bathroom was, collecting moisture, so you get a lot of mold. Now, the landlord decided to go in there and chop these trees out to take care of business. Now, I got to say that it was really interesting because for the next week to 2 weeks, I felt depressed.
Yeah.
And you can imagine because it wasn't just simply that was removed, but I felt literally like the energy had just changed and it sucked, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And I see people that'll do that. All of a sudden, here's this magnificent tree they had. Well, I've just decided I'm going to chop that out. And it's like, are you out of your mind? But there's a living energy that's been extracted. For a lot, I guess. An abortion is the best thing that comes to mind.
That's really excellent. Well, I really appreciate your sensibilities, and I think you've named something that probably everybody can recognize is that when we're young, also we really can make friendships with trees, and of course throughout our life, it's really important to have that friendship with trees and the connection. And we literally are inside the energy field of trees that we live close to, and that means obvious practical things like there's the kind of local rain drip, there's a soil production, there's animal life, but we actually literally are inside their auras, their energy fields, and so we're exchanging information with them. And trees can really help us in our health and our body alignment. I mean, they really are, really great spiritual friends, you could say. So when they're gone, we really notice. The friendship's gone, and also the support for our physical health is gone in that immediate time period.
Mm-hmm. Now, you also talk about working with stones around the house, so it's kind of fun how sometimes you can almost tell when somebody's been in the military because their stones sort of, are aligned or they outline a yard, for instance, and you think, oh, that seems kind of impractical and almost dumb. But, talk about the uses of being able to work with types of stones, rocks, if you will, and how that can be worked as far as either holding or even collecting and absorbing energy.
Right, so stones have been used, of course, by people all across the world. I mean, that megalithic time period, everywhere from, Asia to Western Europe, people were working with stones in a way to create harmony in their environments. And, we think of standing stones and stone circles. And, many of us who haven't had a chance to travel in Europe might think there's just a few stone circles, but they're literally all over Europe, the stone circles. And so people knew what they were doing to create those harmonious environments. And the stone, especially like, say, a single standing stone, was placed on top of a powerful underground energy such as a crossing of water lines or water and fire lines. And so you're getting an energetic quality there, and then the stone is placed on top, and it creates a field around it that's really wonderful for people to go in. It's often like a kind of a cleansing or energizing place when a stone was well placed. So people use those for a long time, and we can understand that today. Sometimes when you look at gardens or something, a public garden, you'll see that something's been well placed and you can feel it, and sometimes you'll see that they've been badly placed and you can feel it. I mean, it's pretty obvious sometimes.
Mm-hmm. I don't know why, but I was just having this image of the movie John Wayne movie, The Quiet Man.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who may not be familiar, here was a person who decided to get away. He was in America. He was a professional boxer, kills a man in the ring, and he goes back to Ireland, which happened to be his homeland. And it was funny because he was asked, how did you get all these stones to build these walls? He says, it really wasn't hard. They were everywhere. I was just moving them out of the way so I can get somewhere, and I figured this was the most practical way to do it. And there were these stone walls everywhere. But, you really take a look at how, people actually use these things, and as you said, a matter of placement, a matter of aesthetic, but it's a matter of a good feel for things. And this is something that you really sort of develop it, but at the same time you have to trust in the instinct that you're using.
Yeah, I think that's really right, because, I mean, you can visualize, a stone wall that looks kind of, bad, and then you can see one where somebody's really thoughtfully actually stayed in that very attentive state of mind, really, while they're building the wall, and that can make a lot of difference. They've tuned in and really put each thing in a place that their body can respond to, so other bodies can respond to it when they see it as well.
I know that we had a guest on the program not too long ago, but he was talking about how he had actually built a stone wall, and he says literally the rocks told him how to place themselves. I mean, he just allowed. And, you know, people might be listening to the program going, are you people out of your mind? Stones, really? They don't talk. But the truth is, they're all energy just like us. Yeah. And it's a matter of tuning in. It's a matter of listening. And you would be astounded that as you allow something like this to happen and to build itself, what the payoff could be. That's
really fabulous. Yeah, I think you're right about that. That if you really pay attention that way, which can be like really responding to the feeling of the stone, then it comes out beautifully. And it gives us such an invitation to do things, you know, sort of beautifully in our lives, you know, just to tune in and really sort of embody that sense of listening. And, you know, even the new science is telling us that, of course, you know, the whole planet is a self-regulating living thing, so why not the stones, you know?
Now, what can a person do starting now? I mean, we're talking about how they can kind of get in tune. Is this sort of a meditative state they can get into, or does this come into a person's dreams as they're sleeping? But what could they do if they happen to be, you know, I'm in a home, you know, maybe by default I ended up here because it works for me and the, you know, and the way that I live and the kind of work that I do. But you can begin to really start doing this sort of a feng shui sort of thing. What are some other things a person can do to get started on this path to create that ideal energizing space?
That's great. I like what you said. It is, you know, the dowsing itself is very much a meditative practice. So you're actually literally dropping into a deep quiet, so then you can feel more distinctly the energies around you. So one way to do that would be, you know, and even the ambiance of it. With the book, we describe the ambiance of a place, sort of the energetic feel of a place. You can, you know, get a very quiet place, maybe in a beautiful quiet morning or some nice afternoon, and wander your house around and see what you feel. You know, just notice that inside and outside. And then I would also, you know, you mentioned dreams. You could welcome the dreams, because it's something in the dream might then mirror back to you what your body's feeling or what your psyche's tuning into. So I like that idea.
Well, you know, and the truth is I actually lived this, you know, about dreams. And I got to tell you what it was, is the house that I was describing earlier that I had lived in with the trees. For a lot of years, this was a place that was old. I think it was built back in 1925. No insulation in the place, very old home. But here was the other thing, too, is I kept having dreams, and this drove me crazy, of a house that was unfinished, and I would dream, oh, the owner's about to work in this area of it and have that rebuilt. It was almost as though the house, through the dreams, literally, was showing me unfinished business constantly. And to me, it was really more of a nightmare in many ways, because I'd wake up, or in the dream, it was an unfinished loft. It was, you know, it drove me nuts. And you could see how what you're talking about here, you know, within your book, Earth Alchemy, that just makes a lot of natural sense. That this isn't voodoo. This isn't, not that there's anything wrong with voodoo, excuse me, but, you know, that this isn't just, you know, some pointed head, cone-headed thing from another planet, you know, that we're just making this stuff up, but there's a reality to what's going on here.
Right, I like that. I think that's really true. And, you know, if we look at the indigenous cultures around the world, and also we look back on all the old traditions, like, you know, this European tradition we're describing, or feng shui, or Vastu in India, you know, people all around the world had a discourse for this and recognized it. So it seems like, you know, it is something we naturally as humans recognize. And when we tune in, we get these, you know, very aesthetic relationships and landscapes, and if we tune out, we end up with very disharmonious things that then make us feel kind of isolated. So I think it's really, you know, an invitation to this part of being human that's, you know, been known, and it's not, you know, weird.
Now, here's the thing. Now, when you think about Earth Alchemy, you know, we talked about trees and stones, so there might be an assumption by our listeners, well, that's great out in the country, but, you know, I may live in a flat in the city, for instance, or I may be in the middle of New York City. This is something that's certainly even applicable to situations like that, isn't it?
Very much so, yeah. You can, before I lived in the place I live now, I was living in an apartment, a small apartment on the third floor, and when I started to learn this, I began to walk around my apartment the way I was describing, you know, feeling the water and fire lines and different things, and I began to see that why I had put things places, and I was able to really determine how I was influenced by the energy, and then I went outside, and I was following this fire line, because I was trying to see where it went after it left the apartment building, and there it was, and the ants were walking along it. The ants actually like to walk along lines, so then I could really see with the ants on the sidewalk and me in my apartment that we were all tuned in to the natural world, even in the middle of the city. So it's an invitation to us to realize we're not disconnected, and we can really just begin to be really attentive.
I see. Now, you said fire line a couple of times here. What exactly is that?
So that's another key earth energy that we look at. So water lines I've described as natural movement of water underground. And then the fire line, also you could call it a fault line because it's tiny fissures in the earth. So the earth, has big fault lines like the San Andreas Fault in California. But there's also little tiny movements here and there, little wrinkles and crinkles, where different materials that had not been aligned up before become aligned because they've shifted, and that creates a little bit of electromagnetic charge, similar to the water, not the same, but similar, that the body can pick up. So just kind of a charge between two types of materials touching each other. And those lines, too, are ones that are the same way. You want them not under your house, if possible, because it's taxing on the body, and they can be used in really dramatic, interesting ways in churches and temples for healing and renewal.
Oh, fascinating stuff. I mean, it's true that your home is not only a place of renewal, but of healing as well, but sometimes, as I was describing, even in my own experience, your house could be screaming at you. It needs to be healed through dreams, believe me.
Yeah.
I consider myself to be a very practical, down-to-earth kind of a person, but as that was happening, I just wake up, oh my goodness, what do I do here? Sometimes you get to a point where you think the best thing to do would be to plow this thing underground and start all over again. But I don't know if that would be practical as well. Now, what about children? Would that be a good dowsing way about going about, getting your home into a feng shui space to simply say, why don't you go ahead and take a shot and see what feels right to you? Because they sometimes, to me, seem to be more in tune with natural laws than most adults. I
think so, and I think children, as you say, are tuned in, and they would pick it up quicker. And even if you just gave them the language, like walk around your room, where is the place you want your bed? I mean, those are really good questions because sometimes when I've harmonized homes or work with people, I'm sort of horrified that the kids are in really bad places. One woman, said to me, and my colleague, could you please come and look at my house? My child simply won't sleep in her room. She rushes every night to jump in the bed with us. And so we went to look at the girl's room, and it was really bad. There was only one spot in the entire room the bed could have been placed, and even so, the room was so disharmonious that almost no human would be comfy there. And so, we recommend not using that room for like a playroom or storage room for the daytime, but not something where people sleep. So sometimes kids can have really a lot of trouble, and the parents won't know kind of why that is. And in her case, that was what was happening.
Yeah, I was just thinking of the book, The Teachings of Don Juan by Carlos Castaneda, and the point that he describes about sleeping on the porch where Don Juan tells him, he says, if you find that special place, you will find no greater relaxation and regeneration than in that spot. And so, as Carlos Castaneda says, he had systematically for hours tried finding this particular spot, but he said once he finally did, he said it was completely true. I had never felt a greater sense of relaxation, of peace and security than I did in that space. So this all makes a lot of sense, what you're talking about here in your book, Earth Alchemy. That's
lovely, yes. It's an invitation to all of us to actually, trust ourselves, feel things, and find those right spots.
Mm-hmm. Now, how did you really get started with this work?
Well, let's see, this specific work, let's see. Boy, it's kind of a long story, and as I mentioned, I had been, I'll kind of add a little bit to my story. I had been, living in indigenous cultures and really, seeing their sensibilities. I mean, when I went to Australia and I had the really, blessing to live in the Central Desert with Aboriginal communities, just how well they understood the earth and how deep their knowledge was just like, oh my gosh, despite all the really, difficulty and horror that they had faced, they were still here to offer their knowledge. I was really moved. And also in my villages in the Himalayas, learning from people. And then I started teaching a class where I teach now at Naropa University in pilgrimage and sacred landscapes. How do cultures over time understand sacred places, and how do they work with them, and what has that meant culturally? And I had lovely guest speakers. I always made sure I had guest speakers who would speak from their heart, like, this is really my tradition, and when I go into the mountains in Tibet, this is what I do, or if I go into the pilgrimage places of India, this is how our family does it, And I couldn't find anybody to speak about Europe in a way that wasn't kind of intellectual. And they had lovely, they were really dear people, and they had wonderful things to say, but they weren't actually talking about feeling the earth.
Right.
And I kept thinking, it can't be dead. There's got to be something alive. So on a sabbatical, I decided just to head to Europe. And I didn't have a lot of time to prepare for my journey because I was so busy, but I went to England, and I thought, it's part of my heritage. I thought I'd just go to where my heritage was. And the only place that people had spoken to me about is labeled sacred was Glastonbury in England. And so I went there, and I just can't believe how much I learned. It was almost like taking a key and reopening my heritage. So it was really something. And it was when I came back from that trip that I got this email from a friend recommending this workshop with Dominique. And normally I would have just deleted that email saying, oh, well, that sounds a little nutty, you know. Is there a Master of Earth Energies of Europe? I wonder, you know. But I went, and then I was really, really happy because I felt, oh, my gosh, I have a living lineage, you know. I'm excited.
You know, you think about the possibilities, Anne, about what you're talking about here within your book, Earth Alchemy, that as we begin to feel, regardless of where our home is, you know, it's a starting point, that you can literally transform your life in ways that you probably couldn't even imagine should you decide to put these things into practice. Describe how perhaps your work has affected people in such ways where all of a sudden they almost did a 180, you know, that their life really transformed where they went into directions they could have never imagined. Do you have a story like that?
Well, just two stories have come to mind. One time we were working with a friend's house, and they were at a place where they were, you know, kind of stuck and tried to find a new job, and they'd moved to they were kind of new in the community, and it was kind of a little bit, you know, energy felt stuck sitting around the house trying to apply for jobs, and, you know, it felt, ugh. And so we decided we would harmonize the house, and, you know, we were out, my colleague and I were outside, and our friend is, you know, she's a woman, and her husband was inside working at the desk, and, you know, just trying to carry on with the job search while we were running around with, you know, doing things with stones outside. And, yeah, he was interested, but not necessarily thinking any big thing would happen. And so we did that, and, you know, left the position, the rock, and leaving it in a position where it would start to affect the house. And then maybe about 5 days later, I was going to harmonize my house, and I needed some help with stones. So my friend said, well, you know, my husband will come over and help you. And he came dashing over, and he leapt out of the car and gave me this monster hug and said, oh, my gosh, he said, I can't tell you how the energy in the house has shifted. And all my job search and everything, I have more energy in my work. And he was just ecstatic. And he had no language for it before in the sense of, like, he wasn't expecting that to happen. He just was, you know, happy that his wife and her friends were having some fun. But all of a sudden, it was changed, you know. So that was one story, and, you know, I have others, but that's the start.
Well, you know, and it only makes sense because, you know, we're living in a day and an age with technology where a lot of people can begin to find that they don't need to go to an office or they don't need to go somewhere else to go work. So just imagine applying this kind of, I guess, earth science, you know, in a way of your office, for instance, to be more productive because you actually feel like you want to be more productive.
Yeah, in fact, actually, you know, my house, too, I mean, after this, you know, colleague and friend helped me line the stones up and everything, I just felt much more happy in my house. I mean, I feel like I have more energy for work, and also I do a lot of writing at home, and I felt much more creative. I felt like I got out of a lot of stuck zones that I hadn't really enjoyed writing alone at home, and now I actually feel like it's kind of yummy, you know.
Mm-hmm. The book is Earth Alchemy. Our guest today, Anne Z. Parker. Is there a website people can find out more about this?
Yes, we have a website. It's www.bouldermasterbuilders.com, and that's BOULDER, and then masterbuilders.com. And you'll see there we have, you know, the book is described there, and also we have articles and blogs and other fun information, so you can keep learning more. You can just keep watching the site and learning more. So aside from tossing the stones to the side, learn where they want to be, and you can find that you'll want to be there as well. Earth Alchemy is the book, aligning your home with nature's energies. And thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program. Thank you. What a fabulous conversation.
You bet. Thank you very much. I also want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. Be sure to visit us at our website at beyond50radio.com. That's the number 50, and sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter. Also, be sure to visit us at our blog. We're going to be posting an archive of this so that you can listen to it at your convenience and share it with others as well. I'm Daniel Davis. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. Remember, live your day past